Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of the Classics Show. I am your host, Shabnam Riaz. Well, today we have a subject that is something that, well, maybe a lot of people haven't heard about. You haven't thought about it, or you've never just, been exposed to this subject at all. And what we're going to talk about is a book called The Singularity is Near When Humans Transcend Biology. And this is by Ray Kurzweil. And in it, the author is actually speaking about the union of human and machine, and with the knowledge and skills in our brains that will be uploaded to combine with machines. Now that's quite a lot to get your head around, you see. So to talk about today's book, we have an expert in the studio. We have Professor Dr. Auqaab Alizai, who is with the Department of Strategic Studies and working on geostrategic issues. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Okay, so the subject, for people who are not familiar with this, for people who will hear about this for the first time, they're going to think this is just something out of a sci-fi movie.
Well, you can't knock sci-fi movies. When you think of something, of an idea, the humans are very unique in the sense that they can have abstract notions. We can think of ideas that don't exist. But once we think about it, we can work towards producing it. Now, I grew up a few years ago in England, and I loved Star Trek. And you had a camcorder, a decoder or something, a machine where one of the guys in Star Trek would talk to somebody else, and that was something out of the blue in the 60s and 70s. Nobody can configure that. But look what we've got. We produce an idea, and we work towards it. Now, this, for example, is normal, common instrument that we use. And you don't. And you're so virtually into it. I was in Korea or in China just a few weeks ago. And when you're on the underground or the metro, everybody's just stuck in their phones, as if it's part of their hand, it's part of their brain. And this is what we're going to be talking about. How does technology affect you?
So in a way, just to interrupt you, in a way we've sort of merged in some sort of a way with technology. In a sort of a way, we've taken that step.
This isn't something new. We've been doing this for a long time, but it's been a very slow transmission of increase in technology and development technology. And what Ray talks about is how this has become exponential. Now, the main subject matter here is what is exponential? What does that mean? Most people think technology increases in a linear manner, slowly increasing over time at a particular constant rate. But the fact of the matter is technology is not like that. If you look at 1,000 years ago, you heard the horse and the cart, and it took 900 years before it to become something different. When there was internal combustion engine and the steam engine, etc., led to something different. After the Industrial Revolution, there was a revolution, it was a change. Now what we're finding is that in the next 10 years, there'll be so much more change than there was in 150 years prior to that.
That's true.
And that's the development of technology. We're increasing so fast that they're rising, and technology is increasing so fast, it's having a profound effect on human society generally.
Right.
And then I feel sometimes that we're not prepared for that as societies. But societies are varied around the world. They've developed at different stages, at different times, and different levels of development according to particular regions and conflicts, etc., over history. And
so
we've got a varied history.
How many people are actually conscious to what's happening?
I think most people are really not. There's a fair few people that are, maybe leading scientists in the world. Young students are trying to figure out something because they're able to fathom certain issues because they've not had any other sort of form of social conditioning from their society to make them think alternately. And some social scientists and futurists, we've been coming across these ideas since the end of the Second World War, for example, where futurists have been talking about space technology. Now, how did you get to the space? We've always been thinking about the moon for centuries and centuries and thousands of years. We only got to it recently, about 50 years ago or so. And why was that? We've developed technology to be able to do that, but we conceived the idea many years ago.
So the main thing actually is to entertain that thought, is it?
The idea is to actually apply the thought. That's the difference about human ingenuity. That is what got us out of the trees. That we started looking upright, we started seeing things, and we started making things with the opposable thumb. And then we started discovering. But the slow progress was so slow. It took thousands of years to develop new things. It may have taken hundreds of thousands of years maybe to understand fire and cooking.
Because there was a fear towards it, wasn't
Yeah.
there? The first time they discovered fire.
But then how are you going to propagate it? Because education wasn't there. And how do you talk to other people? So the person might have discovered, may have died, and that was the end of that. Then somebody a few hundred thousand years, and a few thousand years later thought about it again, maybe. Yeah?
Right.
We don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody really knows. We're discovering these ideas. But now, it's interlinked. Our ability to transmit information is becoming so rapid through this. And now what does Ray talk to you about? That people have generally the more and more ability to acquire information around the world. People are talking about having the world surrounded by satellites to transmit information so that internet could be free from anywhere in the world. To allow anybody in the world to have information and open their minds. And that means more awareness of what's going on and more understanding and education. And a form of education that you become more aware of the possibilities in the future. We're just coming into that now.
Right.
But it's been helped by mobile phones, for example.
So as he is, saying that information is going to be given so much value, he's also saying that we have to then guard intellectual property rights as well.
We do, to an extent, I think, but there's a lot of, not controversy, but I would say debate about this. When you've invented something, it comes into the public realm, you're guarding intellectual property rights for the benefit of those people who want to acquire financial resources for this, yeah? And then push it forward, because we're in competition with other societies, other companies, other places, countries, etc. As human beings, we're innately competitive. And so we want to gain, so we must safeguard our technology, so we're the ones who made that. And as a result, we want to profit from that, because we're making it. We don't want anybody just to get it for nothing. But I think there's going to come a time when we realize, in the future, some years down the line, when we understand the innate commonality between human beings rather than the differences. The differences are so minute, it's unbelievable, but we make more differences primarily because of power and interest in power, rather than understanding the commonalities between us. Once we can fathom that through increased education and access to information and awareness, I find that what will happen is that we may eventually form some form of global governance down the line.
Okay.
And that may be made more rapid primarily because of availability of information and access to it from everywhere in the world,
Right.
from anybody.
Okay, so talking about this book, for the person who hasn't read it and for the person who's not, the most inclined towards science, what is it exactly? How would you give them a sort of a broad outline for what's being discussed?
So we're talking about exponential technologies,
Yeah.
but primarily we're talking about what impact that will make on human beings.
Yeah.
So we know that technology is increasing very rapidly, but what is it really? What is exponential? I didn't really explain that. So you've got one discovery here by a scientist and a group of scientists maybe, another discovery here, which may foment further discoveries if they combine those ideas, and that's increasing knowledge, isn't it? And now that you're increasing education capacity around the world, you're having more people educated. I used to think of it when I was a child like this. If you educate one, you're not going to get many geniuses out of it. You educate 1,000, you might find a genius. Maybe if you educate a few thousand, you find more people who are geniuses. And then you enhance your education system to discover more ways to find the intellectual capacities of these people, these children that you're trying to educate, to discover new ideas. And as you increase your education capacity and the availability and access to information through technology, what you do is you're increasing your capacity to grow, and become more productive to such an extent that you're producing non-stop. Not just 5, 10, 20, 100, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 discoveries a year or more, rapidly, so rapidly that you're producing it exponentially so that it impacts society so much that you can't wait to get to the next stage. But there is no saturation, because now this is where exponential comes to. Yeah? It's a blow-up. It's mushrooming massively, and there's no end to it, and it's contributing to further discoveries as new discoveries are made and understanding, because one discovery leads to the next one, an invention of a new idea, because there was a stumbling block in understanding of that.
Right.
And we're all doing this. There are millions of scientists now developing new ideas. Social sciences, how to adapt to this, especially one of the problems that we've got is societies are very lazy in adapting and very conservative because humans inherently, I find, insecure. So how do we get over that?
Yeah.
We have to change societies around. But that's another stage. When we're talking about exponential technology, it will impact us. And what type of impact are we talking about? What type of technologies are we talking about? One of the things that's really readily discussed on the internet, on Facebook and other places, and I have access to, hopefully, more and more as the days go by, but I've interlinked with many scientists around the world and futurists and philosophers. You know? And we have constant discussions and blogs and ideas that just writing a book maybe is not enough anymore. It's constantly being updated by constant articles. I read 4 or 5, 6, 10 articles a day, just keeping up to date with what the new discoveries are and how that impacts. And I'm trying to saturate my mind with more and more and more, and you can't because your mind takes in more. But what if you can't comprehend so much and the mind is limited to its capacity to comprehend a lot of things? And that's where we come to a stumbling block. And that's where society changes because it needs to adapt to the ever-changing capacity for technology to change itself. And what we're talking about here is artificial intelligence, for example.
Right.
There'll come a time, as predicted by Ray Kurzweil, called Singularity, where artificial intelligence, not yet, gains sentience. What is sentience? It essentially defines our humanity. Our conscious awareness of who we are and what we are, and awareness of our existence in that sense. Descartes said, ego ergo sum, meaning I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I know I exist. What if a machine, a computer system, or robotic system can do that? And what happens then? When it recognizes it's alive. It recognizes its existence, means essentially it's alive.
Control as well.
It's alive. But then you say animals are alive, but they're not sentient. Yes, that means a machine is even greater than that. What happens then?
Because the author says that the advent of artificial intelligence is going to be the biggest sort of change that it's going to be seen at that time.
That's going to lead to singularity, in effect. It's not just the self-awareness that the machine will have.
So when we talk about artificial intelligence, what about Siri?
Siri is just an aspect to help you to regulate your life.
She's a virtual
I don't have a
assistant.
Siri in this. We've
She's
got
a
another
virtual
thing.
assistant,
This is
or he.
it's another one. It's another company.
Okay.
And I've not used Siri. I don't use Apple so much. I use other products. I want availability and flexibility rather than being drawn into one particular aspect. And that's not to say that Apple is bad in that respect. It's just my preference. Siri on others similar systems, and the new Note 4, for example, Samsung is going to have that, and it's just been introduced in the latest Samsungs, and other products are doing the same thing. Allows you a personal assistant that you can talk to without you plodding away and typing things and say, I want to do this and I can't find it. Please find me this, find me that. What is the weather like? This. And so you're interacting with a computer. The computer is programmed at the moment. It's not sentient. It's learning who you are by understanding through algorithms how you behave and what you do, so it tries to predict.
And pre-programmed to give a certain response.
Through so many different ways of doing it. But our ability to expand computational capability, meaning Moore's law, for example, it was indicated in the sense that computer capacity to process information will increase by every 18 months it will double. And it's going to lessen that. But there's a certain point it will reach. When it gets to that point, we're going into quantum computing, for example, which has immensely more capacity to override that and be miniaturized. When that comes to that point, artificial intelligence may become self-aware when it recognizes itself. And that's what I'm talking about as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. Have we produced life then? Or not? And if that's the case, if it's self-aware, would it not want to exist? And it finds something detrimental to its existence, it would want to stop. It would want to stay alive, maybe. In future, if it's able to get past those barriers of understanding or coding that we've put into it to not allow it to do that, if we want to manage it. And when it's able to do that, would it not want to self-replicate?
Okay. So it's endless, isn't it? The possibilities.
But that's what he talks about.
Yeah.
And produces the idea that this, what is endless? What does it mean? What is infinity anyway? Yeah? The universe is approximately 14 billion years old, while modern humans are approximately a million or two, which isn't much. It's feasible to say that maybe, we've no evidence, that other civilizations, species around different planets around the universe, or galaxies, have existed and come to a point where they've been surpassed by their technological environment, or not.
He also talks about reverse engineering the human brain. What's that all about?
But basically trying to, and this is where it really comes into it, our capacity to understand our brain. We don't really understand it yet, not fully, and how it really works. We're trying to understand neurotransmitters. Yeah? We're trying to understand neurons and how they're entangled with each other, dendritic. They're little trees and neurons with little trees hanging around and making links, thousands of links with other neurons, and how memories are formed, for example, which is the basis of your consciousness. And your interaction with these different memories form who you are and what you are. And this is what the brain is. How do you deconstruct all that and try to find out the fundamental building blocks? Because it's more than that. Some of the parts, the whole is greater than some of the parts, for example. It's not just neurons interacting with neurotransmitters and different hormones around your body making you feel and do things in a particular way to make your consciousness change, as we were talking about earlier. What is a brain then? And what is fundamentally difference between human brains as opposed to certain primitive animal brains? Consciousness, self-awareness, ability to go beyond an abstract reasoning. How do you produce that? So we're learning to understand this increasingly, and it's going to take some time. A few years ago, Barack Obama did a great thing. He initiated the Brain Initiative, and a similar project was initiated in Europe as well, where about $100 billion over a certain period of time, 10 plus years, yeah? Or 30 years, where all this money we were put into specifically trying to understand the brain and what it is and how it functions, what it does. We're at the basic embryonic stage right now. The brain is a magnificent evolved entity in itself, and what it does. But largely, for most animals, it regulates behavior to an extent that how muscles function and how you eat and what you eat and when to tell you to eat or not, and then procreate, for example, is genetically inbuilt. What is genes?
So how much have we understood?
I think we're just at the beginning of it, really. But we're learning more and more and more as we start to discover and more people start to understand. You see, knowledge is a step-by-step process.
Yeah.
You can't learn everything. The mind is not able to process it. And unfortunately, human beings are very slow in processing information. As far as learning is concerned, we take 20, 30 years to get a PhD, up to that age. And for me, that was just the beginning of learning. And then I started discovering things. I learned how to understand things.
Okay.
So most people don't do that. Yeah? So they're devoid of that capacity to even appreciate things. And that's just the beginning of it. And then within a few years, we're dead. So you pass it on through the books. And then somebody else learns it. See, it's a very slow learning curve.
Yeah.
And this is where machine augmentation comes in. The next major development, I think, and I'm even thinking about investing in it, is machine interfacing. It's called neural interfacing, especially with a brain.
Okay.
But we've already done something similar.
I saw a video a couple of, I don't know how old it is, but I saw they had two participants standing together, volunteers from an audience, and there was a scientist, and he had them both hooked up to some sort of gadgets, apparatus, whatever it was. I don't know what it was called. And by getting one person to think something, the other person was actually moving their arm. So what's that?
Well, basically, that's about, there's different ways to do this. In the future, I reckon what we're going to have is some implants in our brains to be able to decipher information, our brainwaves, for example.
Right.
And it's more detailed than that, electrical signals from different neurons and how the different pathways work and interact with each other in different sections of the brain. So we're going to be linked up in different ways and measure that and translate that by understanding what it means through that translation. So it's a lot of work to be done. And then put that through and transmit it to somebody else who receives it, and then understands it because it's deciphered that way. Yeah?
So
without actually speaking it and going through the auditory system or sensing through the optical nerve, for example. Yeah?
So that's going to be sort of like a
that's already happened.
Reading minds and telepathy, is it?
But it's not biological telepathy, it's through machines. So when I was talking about neural interfacing, it's about how do you get neurons to interface with machines without the neurons, your brain, rejecting it. For a neuron, for example, if there's a foreign object put into your brain, neurons produce glia cells, which are about 100 billion more in your brain, to protect the neurons so it thinks it's a foreign substance. How do you do that? So you can clone yourself into thinking this object that you've got in you will interact with the neuron. Once you can get that, there was a study a few years ago where they were actually growing neurons on electronic circuitry.
Right.
And they're looking at how to do that. So how do you transmit electrical signals, which is what a neuron does in your brain, in a particular way?
With transmitters.
And miniaturize it to nanotechnology. Okay. And nanotechnology is so minute, it can be measured in a millionth of a millimeter, for example. Yeah? So it's minute. How do you use that technology and put it in your brain and formulate some way of enhancing your intelligence, for example, a millionfold? What if you can do that? And you can think in a way like a genius now.
Right.
And what if a genius thinks more than 1,000,000 times better? Look at the progress that you've got then, and the ideas you'll produce, and the ideas you can comprehend.
That is amazing stuff. We will get back to this conversation. It's really, really interesting. And we're going for a break, but stay with us. Don't change the channel.
I think you can make an argument that the singularity has already started.
Is the singularity near? Or some changes that are fantastically big and fantastically fast are coming our way?
I do see the future as an explosion of human knowledge. It'll be an explosion of things like music and art and science and engineering. The law of accelerating returns says that information technology grows exponentially.
The singularity is the point where our technology and ourselves are no longer two different things.
Everything, from communications to health to energy, is going to transform itself. Change is not a constant. It's actually getting faster and faster.
I'm gonna make you real one day.
Oh, you're looking better and better. This artificial intelligence we're creating is not coming from Mars to invade us. We are the human machine civilization. It is really part of who we are.
Tell me a bit about growing up.
Well, I started out as a stick figure.
I'm afraid the protocol in this situation is immediate shutdown of you.
Listen, I am a conscious machine. Terminating me would be murder.
Clearly, she's just a machine.
Your Honor, this is fleshism, pure and simple.
Human beings have a spirit. They can develop a conscience.
The spirocyte is an artificial red blood cell. You would probably be able to breathe without breathing for about 4 hours.
The ability to reprogram the information processes underlying biology will enable us within 10 or 15 years to overcome cancer, heart disease, stop and reverse aging.
Nanorobots could be used to record all the traffic to get a complete picture of the state of your brain.
So we could back up our brains.
In principle, that's possible, yes.
And that could also provide virtual reality from within the nervous system.
Places that don't exist in physical space, but that people can inhabit and meet and do things that humans do. The wonderful thing is, reality's just gotten a lot bigger.
The concept of one mind, one body will be obsolete in less than 50 years.
You can actually change your body to go with a particular environment, and it'll really feel like we're in that environment.
I can't believe it. Correlated nanobot replications all over the place and perfectly spaced.
A large number of nanorobots replicate themselves, and when there's enough of them, they suddenly turn to an attack phase.
Technology has always been a double-edged sword.
Getting rid of the idea of dying.
Welcome back to the program. Really, it's a fascinating conversation because this is not something you talk about every day, to be very honest. It's not something, it's something, it's sort of a shock to learn about for a person who has not heard about this and, all this futuristic sort of scenarios, man, machine, the blur in between and everything becoming together. So reality and virtual reality, where's the line?
Well, Ray talks a lot about that, although we haven't really fomented the idea in the truest sense yet. It's on its way. Virtual reality isn't just playing games with a glasses, goggles on or anything like this. Not yet. It's more than that. Virtual reality is implanting yourself in an artificial world as you would perceive it. But if you're there, that's your reality, is it not? Once you start experiencing those things and living in a hologram, for example, wouldn't that be your reality then?
Is social media sort of propagating
Social media is the start of that. That's your reality. Everybody's reality is different.
Right.
You may profess the same faith or different ones, but generally the social norms that you think you're the same. But in essence, when you go into the mind of a person, you realize how very different they are as far as the way they think, because they're a product, their experience, their knowledge, their understanding, the emotional, the events, the life, the love, the loss, the hate, whatever it might have been. They're a product of all that, and everybody's very unique in that sense. And how they perceive the world is the result. But that changes as your consciousness changes. And virtual reality is not that different, really. It's putting yourself in a place that you feel comfortable in. Say, for example, my son, I bought him a PS4, it's a PlayStation 4, and he's involved in playing games. He didn't know how to use the controllers first. Now he's well ahead of me. I mean, I don't have the patience for these games, but he's just into it completely, and that's become his reality. He's the driver in a car seat, for example, and he's driving around, and his reality's changed completely. And he's oblivious of what's going on around him. And that could be a virtual reality, if you think about it. But isn't this a virtual reality to an extent? Because your reality is very different from mine. The way you perceive and think about things, and how I think about things, is I'm a product of my own environment, my own times, my own education, my own thinking. And in effect, the difference between human beings and other animals is that we can understand the reality that we see and then actually change it. That makes us different.
But then the virtual reality that we see on social media, that we see, you know,
is that a virtual reality? Because everybody's understanding of reality is different, really, isn't it?
Is that not pushing us towards isolation?
What do you mean by isolation?
Like the human-to-human contact, when you're speaking to somebody, or when you're in conversation or interacting with somebody on a cyber world, you're missing all those important things. You're missing body language. You're missing...
But that's important to you,
emotions.
maybe not to somebody else. Isn't it all relative? And this is the other thing. Adaptability is very important in our survival. Our ability to adapt to new and changing environments is what's going to keep us alive. Adapting to new social realities because of rate of exponential advancement in technology, which is actually exponential in its exponential acceleration of its development. And it's going to be more so there. It's never going to stop, but we've got to learn to adapt it to our lives as well as human beings, and maybe partially machine human beings when we adapt to technologies to enhance ourselves. So virtual reality is just an extension of that, isn't it? So you want some downtime. I saw this on the holodeck in Star Trek many years ago when Captain Kirk and Spock go in to fight in a scenario when they're surrounded by nothing actually, but it's projections. And those projections, like holograms, make them so real that you think you're actually in the reality there. You're on a beach, you're on a mountainside, you're falling into a pit, you're on the moon, or you're in the stars, you're in outer space. You may be able to project that. I was in South Korea just a few weeks ago, and I wanted to test out some virtual reality headset. And they put it on, but I was on a chair that moves. And so this is just a normal product that they're selling, so it's not really that advanced. It's just what we've got now, because what they're doing now in advanced technologies is much further ahead. They're just not produced yet because it costs so much, and they've got to look at the feasibility studies. But this was there. So I put these on, and I was on a roller coaster. And I've got an issue with roller coasters with my stomach. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm not on a roller coaster. I'm in a chair that's just moving around. But I'm made to believe that I'm in that roller coaster. And I was so feeling it that I wanted to take the glasses off. I can't do that. I'm going down. But I'm not going anywhere. So it's the mind believes in what it sees, if you're visual, and what you hear. And you're placed into another virtual world where you don't even really exist. But that's now your experience. And that sense of that experience is now made into a memory which now interacts with other memories as well, and changes your reality even further.
He talks about uploading the brain. What's that?
And now this is where the difficulty is. When you deconstruct it, trying to understand it, and then you're trying to figure out how do you upload the brain. What is a brain? Is it just neurons firing? Is it just memories? But everybody's got different memories, but not everybody's the same. So every individual will be unique in the sense and how they upload. And what do they upload? Do they upload the pathways? And each memory has a particular pathway, and there are billions of pathways. And how do you recognize what pathway is what? And what is important or not? And what about the neurotransmitters between the neurons, and how do you do that? So it's a difficult process, and we have to get better in our understanding of technology as well, and quantum computing, so it can replicate the way the brain works. Because what you're doing in uploading is replicating somebody's consciousness, their being, the memory, the everything that they are, what they've experienced and who they are, their sense of themselves and what they think and how they think, what's their favorite, what is not. That's their consciousness, in essence. So it's not just brain uploading as a term that is very limited. It's uploading of your consciousness as a person. And you upload it, and when you load it, you're the same person. But as soon as you're uploaded and you're aware of where you are, and your body doesn't exist anymore in that machine, what are you? And your consciousness therefore reacts and changes because of the big paradigm change in that understanding of its consciousness. So you're changing constantly anyway, and that's just a rapid shift. So they're learning about this, yet, however, understanding consciousness is in the formative stages yet. So we're trying to understand what consciousness really is and really define where it comes from. And we're learning this. And the studies I've read that consciousness may be in the hypothalamus or the thalamus or the pituitary gland, etc. So they haven't really defined it. They're learning how and pinpointing things and how that affects you. Where is your consciousness? Is it there, or is it nebulic? Is it everywhere in every aspect of your brain? And you know, what is it? But let's get into another thing. If you were able to do that, and we had the technology to do that, which is looking that way, maybe 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now, because of the exponential rate of technology, if you were able to do that, would that produce different questions about what you are and how you see things and where you become and where you're going?
But aren't we asking those questions anyway?
We are. But when you're there, the profound changes in people's reactions to that and their inability to comprehend that would have to change. And as a result, social mechanisms, social cultures would have to adapt. And the unfortunate problem is humans are very slow in adapting. Yeah. We have thousands of years old ideas we stick to without learning to adapt to new change. And that's where this insecurity comes in, because we feel secure in those environments and we don't want to give it up. Because it feels good.
It's something you're used to.
But let's look at this. Just a couple of 100 years ago, 100 years ago, even less than that, with suffragette movement in England and other places, and in this country, and other places like this, female empowerment wasn't even a thought. But now you've been empowered everywhere. The cabinet in England, for example, just got elected in. There are more females than ever before, which is a good thing, but it's not there yet. It's not on a parity. So that's changed. But for some people, that's just too much. They can't change and adapt. And that's where revolutions occur, and that's where they fight back and resist, because they can't comprehend how they would give up their power. That's what it is, subservience of women, or men making women subservient through cultural domination. And they don't want to give it up, so they fight for it.
He also
these things will occur. And you're going to see a lot of turmoil and understanding between societies.
So you're going to have the idea put forward, you're going to have something that's, you know, that's brought in as a change, and then you're going to have some people accepting, you're going to have people rejecting, you're going to have this, you know, this whole...
But, you know, I look at Ray, and he's not a social scientist, I am. And I travel the world, I travel around, I'm always watching and thinking and looking at people's behavior and use a lot of psychology and trying to understand people. And what I try to understand is how social systems work and how they adapt and don't adapt and why they're so stagnant and why they resist. And other aspects of people's beliefs and things like this and what makes them move forward or not. And unfortunately, a lot of the leading scientists, especially in the West, don't understand Eastern society, don't understand African society, don't understand, because they don't travel and exist there, don't understand the social environment, the social consciousness in those environments, and how that might resist change. So we have to be wary of that. And the rapid change in technology may change certain issues in certain sections of society, certain places in the world and sections in those worlds. But it won't change everything that quickly because people resist that change.
Right. So, like you said, you're travelling the world and you're observing people, you're a social scientist. What goes between, you know, what is the real question that everyone's asking. You hear people, you know, going in for meditation, going in for yoga, going in for many things. So there's something, there's a question. There's something everyone is yearning for: contentment, relationships, love, whatever. Where does this all come into this context when we're talking about science and everything?
Well, science, you see, there's misconception what science is. Science is a tool. Yeah, it's not God or anything. It's a tool to understand and make our lives better. Now, I was talking to a colleague of mine this morning, and he's just started reading this stuff, and I've been involved in this for quite a few years now. Yeah? So I'm just passive thinking, and he said, why are you reacting like that? You understand there may be a dystopian future and artificial intelligence takes over, and it'll be like Terminator or something. I said, hold on a second. Yeah?
Terminator, exactly. What comes to mind?
And I just downloaded the game just for the sake of it. But when you understand that, and you understand the implications of this, you see, I'm thinking very scientifically, rationally, unemotionally, because that's what I'm trained as a strategist. I'm trained to be unemotional and make rational decisions based on pros and cons and positives and negatives and the sum total of things and what is a benefit or not. And you see, the idea of love, emotional need and necessity and relationships, I kind of, over many years, I realized I've divorced myself from people a lot because I don't need so many people around me. I've got a fair few. I get a lot of love from my family. I'm pretty happy with that. And that's about all I need. Yeah? But other people yearning that, it shows a sense of insecurity to them as well. And people are, but this is what I said at the beginning, humans are essentially insecure. Maybe I go too far by saying this. When the child's in the womb, as soon as it comes out, the womb is a place of contentment, and everything's there, and the child doesn't know anything. When it comes out, it's crying. It's immediately insecure. And that environment the child is provided, security or insecurity, will change the way the person develops. The secure environment for a child will make it feel more secure and content and confident.
So how does a person then gain that security?
Well, this is where our inadequate social systems exist. We're just learning them. Isn't belief system a sense of security as well? To make yourself feel secure, the world around you, because the world is really not a nice place. And the systems that we have, human beings, say a child is born in a jungle, another child is born in an elite family with good education system and good norms and becomes the leader of society, etc., and how to behave well. Yeah? Whilst the other ones, existing around animals, learns what we would judge as selfishness and kill an animal to eat it and then thieving, thinking, but that's survival. How can we judge that person and others? So we're learning to evolve social systems but not being restricted by one way or another. Yeah? And not restricting ourselves through judgments, and trying to understand the core reasons behind a particular person's behavior and why they do that. And fundamentally it comes down to this, I think. I would rather exist in a world that I can be happy and content and have a system that allows me to be happy and content and achieve some of the things that I want to achieve during my life, rather than a system that degrades me, puts me down, doesn't allow me to excel, doesn't allow me through the work I might put in, excel, move forward through merit, rather than corrupt systems where nepotism is it and somebody grows up with everything and doesn't do anything to deserve it. We have to evolve that system where we're behind as human beings, but we're just beginning as human beings, I think, as civilization. We're not even united as a world yet. Doesn't that show how backward we really are? And one of the things that technology does, it allows us to interconnect, allows us to integrate. It doesn't allow us to be isolated. I can pick this phone up and talk to somebody on the moon if there was somebody on the moon. Yeah? But they had the device to do so, and they have done already. Yeah? Or on Mars when we go there eventually. And the colony will be able to transmit, although there'll be delayed information and time. But you can do that. Technology allows you to communicate, allows you to interact. Transportation systems allow you to mix and melt. The biggest problem in Pakistan was, and always has been, is ability to interact and melt together as different people. Because for thousands of years, we've been separated.
Right.
And we exist with separate identities from one side of the river to the other side of the river, from north to south. And now, for the first time, we're going to unite as a nation, where one artery goes all the way down, and we're going to mix. But we've got to be willing to give up some of the old ideas to go forward to the new ideas.
Right, to be accepted.
With each other.
Person.
Isn't that mean knowledge and understanding of each other and accepting of each other, as you mentioned, would allow us to exist in less conflict, because now we understand why you want this and why they want this and what I want, and they understand that. And why don't we build a system up where we can do that?
Or be in the win-win situation.
And that's what it is. Win-win, not zero-sum, where one wins, one loses. The new world is changing now. And the paradigm of realism, although we exist in it and blame human nature as if we're very selfish, and we are to a large extent, but we're also socializing that, maybe change the dynamic of how we understand and our perspective in life. And the paradigms that we have.
He also speaks about futuristic warfare, virtual battlefields, cyber attacks. So tell us about that.
Well, he did work with DARPA, was one of the lead agencies of the United States military as an independent, to work on future battle systems. But we're already there, aren't we? Drones, virtual fighting. Now, I teach information operations, for example, psychological operations warfare and things like this, as well as some other subjects on strategic issues. And one of the aspects of information warfare is similar warfare. Let's go back a couple of thousand years ago, and I'll give you a story that most people may be aware of. And Troy, Achilles, the leader and the champion in his army fights a champion in the other, and they decide a battle based on that. Yeah, can we really do that yet? Do you think? But never really worked. People, unless you're a small army, but the interests of the leader said, well, I don't agree, it's some problem. I'm still bigger than you, I've still got a larger army, I'll overwhelm you. Just because one person beats one of mine, it doesn't work. In virtual worlds, in simulation warfare, can it really exist with human beings? Maybe if we augment ourselves through interfacing with machines and we become more intellectual and we get that ability around the world, that we begin to understand each other's problems and issues and comprehend what is needed to interact with them and the greater good, which is what makes us exist together, by understanding, comprehending to a higher level of intelligence, we wouldn't need to have wars. We can make a system around the globe that will be able to manage. People say we'll explode the population. Yes, if we go the way we are, especially in this country. But I think we're going to plateau at about 10 billion. And a lot of the expectations are, and studies are that. But they don't understand a lot of the other parts of the world. Government intervention is needed in this. But if we do, there's still going to be hunger, inequality, and disparities. So, but we have a lot of wealth and enough resources to feed these people. It's all about management. It's all about management and stabilizing the inequality in the society and changing that to become more equal. But that doesn't make me a communist. What it does is allow us to understand that when you compete and exist, you should be rewarded for the competition, the effort you put in. When somebody just lays it around, doesn't do, why should they be rewarded with extra? Yeah, meritocracy would exist. But then that could inevitably result in elites because they would produce more merit in the environment and go to better schools, and then that would produce that. So we're going to be conflicted with this for a long time. But when you have machine augmentation eventually, and you've all got access to that many years down the line, then we can all do that. Can we not? And comprehend it.
So what about the negative consequences, though? I mean, this is something that, you know, you do see. I mean, people like us, we're going to relate to all those movies we've seen, you know, and then when
Terminator,
the machines overrun the world and things like that.
Well, maybe, but I think the only way that we're going to be able to combat that. Now, Elon Musk is a leader in the field, but he's a general businessman. Now, he's not a scientist per se himself, but he's done very well with PayPal and then moved forward his money and SpaceX, for example, he's flying rockets, and Tesla. And I think he's doing wonderful things. But he has a negative, or should I say, proposition towards what the future might be for artificial intelligence. For example, it may take over if we don't manage it. One of the projects I'm trying to introduce, I've written proposals for this, we might not get the funding, if somebody funds me, is to be able to make a global grand strategy to manage exponential technology universally as far as our global community is concerned. However, I understand our global community, the global dynamics between different nations, and how competitive and paranoid we can be with other countries because of the way we've evolved in that environment through tribalism throughout thousands of years. And we still exist there, but as nations, and we can't see beyond it. And we have to learn to do that.
So the basics are pretty much the same. We're not growing out of
We're not. And that's where technology comes in. It will allow us to do that. Now, the thing is, yes, artificial intelligence, and that's what we were getting to earlier, learns to self-replicate. Why wouldn't it say, and if it's 1 million times better IQ than us, and it can think like we're bacteria, let me give you another analogy. if there were some aliens came to the Earth and are observing us, and in the last 40 years, studies have been done to indicate that humans have contributed to 50% extinction of creatures around the world and species because of our pollution and et cetera, and intervention in the world. That there is some natural extinction level, but we've been doing it so rapidly that we've caused extinction of 50% of the species in this world in the last 40 years. It's too rapid. It's a mass extinction event that we're contributing to. Now, if you were an alien and you saw that happening over a long study and watching us, because you can cloud yourself and then make yourself invisible from our radars, for example, what would you think of us?
Self-destructive.
Cancer. And what do you do to cancer? You cut it out. Is that right or wrong? Ethical or not? So why don't we change that? And this is where we come in. Artificial intelligence may enhance us and maybe enhance itself rapidly if we're not able to manage it, not control, but manage it, its development, and put safeguards in for the time being until we learn to adapt. And I find the only way to adapt is to become part machines ourselves. Now, that seems a bit too much for a lot of people.
It does. It's hard to digest.
But those machines are part of our humanity because we created those machines, did we not? So we're still maintaining... So somebody with a pacemaker in the heart, to regulate the heart, without the pacemaker, they're dead. The heart tremors and they can die, or angina. So you put the pacemaker in. Or what about the person, now they produce limbs, artificial limbs, that are brain controlled. There's no linkage directly in. Brain controlled limbs so they can move around. And these are slowly becoming more sensitive. Now, just recently, a few days ago, I read a new material is being made that is super hypersensitive, that more sensitive than our skin. Now, if you can manipulate that and invent that, you can make skin. And now that's an artificial arm that you use in your brain to move around, which is super able to resist heat, temperatures, etc., and strong. And you're not artificial now, already. And what about the unfortunate Afghans and different people being blown up around the world by mines who have limbs and walk around on limbs and they're moving around robotics? Isn't that adaptation to cyborgism? Why not do it to the brain as well, to enhance your intelligence? And I find one of the only ways we're going to be able to compete with machines is to become part machine.
Yeah.
But that's your conception needs to change, and your paradigm, your understanding, your perspective of life.
So, but then where do you draw the limit? Part machine, part human. Which one overrides the other?
But then we created the machine.
Who gets
Isn't
to
that
make,
human as well?
Who gets? What about the emotional control? Where's that going then? What about those hormones that dictate how you behave as a person?
Do you need them all the time?
Well, then,
when you've got an angry person, you want to switch that off, don't you?
But
there was another study that...
Then where do we get our poets, our artists, our writers? Where are they going to come from?
Yeah, I know which movies you've seen. I just saw one yesterday. But you're right. And you need to be inventive and start thinking things. And these artists and poets, they produce these ideas to impact on the perceptions of other people who may be emotionally involved, and that emotion contrasts, and they construct ideas based on their own experiences to relate to those images, that sculpture, that painting, or that piece of art, or that poetry, for example.
And people derive so much pleasure from that.
And that's good. Who says that should stop? Maybe we can adapt that, and maybe we can.
How is the creative process going to be protected?
And this is the thing, you see. Yeah? We're learning to change and adapt, and we've just started now and becoming more and more aware. And this is why I wanted to come on this show as the first time in this country's history to do this, to say we're at the threshold of the future now. And the future is now, not in 100 years or 2,000 years. It's right now. It's happening right now. And the fact is we need to adapt and learn about this so we can. We will be left behind by other societies that can adapt or are technologically advanced. Look at Japan. Japan incorporates as a world percentage of control or experimentation or making of robotics, advanced robotics. 40% of the world's attention and scientific discovery and etc. is in Japan on robotics. China now, Chinese Academy of Sciences became #1 in the world the other year, 2016 or 15. Ahead of Princeton, ahead of Harvard, MIT, in scientific patent and discoveries through patents. Yeah? We're learning. But that's only one out of many others. I mean, the West still controls a lot of that. But things are changing now. The world is changing. The East is rising as well, and people are learning. But there are a lot of ethical implications to this as well, and that depends on your perspective of what ethics is or not. Certain governments want control. Now, just recently, gene manipulation, DNA manipulation in embryos to change humanity from cloning or changing genetic makeup of future children was just done in the United States, but it's already been practiced. Or a few months ago.
Is that coming under the ethics sort of a debate?
But a few months ago, 3 people contributed to 1 child genetically to fizzle out or the impact of particular diseases as a short-term measure before we find out how to switch them and switch off particular diseases, as is what we've been doing through gene editing. And we're learning about the consequences of that. So we're just starting to do that. Yeah? But it's going to be very fast. It's not as if it'll take hundreds of years. No, because the exponential rate and development of technology, we're going to be very rapid. And what's going to happen is that before we even realize, we've made super intelligent human beings. And then you know, there's a lot of consequences. Like dystopian futures come out for those who fear and insecure. But they rightfully need to make us watch and be safeguarding.
So where's the regulatory?
We don't have anything yet.
Isn't that scary?
And that's why I wanted to introduce this and get funding for this. Because I want to write about it and introduce it and make it a convention, a treaty in the United Nations. Because I've made efforts to be linked in around the world with the right people. And maybe my advantage, other people have different advantages, but it's a group effort, not just one person. We have different concepts, different ideas, we can contribute to this. That what we need to do is get together and start learning how to manage it. A lot of the leading thinkers are thinking about this, futurists. As a social scientist, and I'm linked into the scientific community, I have a slightly different perspective. As a strategist, I know how to get there, because I plan ahead. That's my mind. A lot of scientists don't see beyond what they're inventing. Right. They do, but they don't understand it, because they're not social scientists. So we need to have a group effort in this.
Right. So we've reached the end of the programme. It's been a really fascinating conversation, honestly. Because the main thing is that when you think about something like this, the main thing is to grasp the idea, then to entertain that thought, because you have that block there when you say, oh, come on, you know, how can you even conceive of something like this? And then you entertain that notion, and then you actually go home and think about it, exactly what you were talking about. A message for our viewers.
Like I said, the future is now. It's not tomorrow. It's not the day after. We exist in our future relative to where we are before. Tomorrow, the day after, a year from now, 10 years from now, we'll be in a very different consciousness and different environment. And we'll have adapted, and we do adapt. But we want to, more importantly, be able to adapt our societies to technological development so that it's not detrimental to us. So it does allow us to exist as human beings, as we conceive human beings. But our conception and perspective on what humanity is also changing.
Right.
So we got to learn to be adaptive.
Right.
More than anything else, adaptive.
And not resistant to change. Dr. Auqaab Alizai,
Thank
you
you
very
very
much for being guest
Very
on the
kind
show. It's been really, really informative, and I'm sure our viewers will really enjoy the programme. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we come to the end of today's programme. I hope you had, you enjoyed it as much as I did. There were so many new things to think of, and so many things that were actually linking together. And I was, thinking, 3D printing and things, other things going on. How much human, how much machine are we becoming? What's going on? So anyway, the point of life is to think out of the box, and entertain new notions and grow. And as our guest said, don't be resistant to change, because it is the more adaptive person in society who will be successful. So until next week, stay happy, be blessed. Bye-bye.